As you join us, please feel free to drop your name in the chat, your organization, and where you're joining from. And we'll get started shortly. It sounds like some folks might be having challenges with the chat. We're trying to enable it. So bear with us for a moment as we get that up and going. Want to welcome folks as you arrive. We'll be starting in just a couple of minutes. We're working on the chat function, but in the meantime, please feel free to drop your name, your organization, and where you're joining from into the chat box if you can. Thank you, Kathy. Hi, Claire. It's good to see you. Cynthia, hi. Got a lot of friends of Yes coming in, and hopefully folks who are excited to see our incredible panel. Good afternoon once again. Please drop your name, your organization if you're a part of one, and where you're joining from in the chat box. And we are going to start here in just probably another minute here. All right, we are going to begin. Thank you all for joining us. Good afternoon, and welcome to Access for All, a live roundtable hosted by Yes Nature to Neighborhoods, or Yes as we're known. My name is Eric Aholm, and I've had the privilege of being Yes's executive director for the past 18 years. And I want to thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. So today we are asking a big question. How can we continue to make the outdoors welcoming and accessible for all Californians, especially at a time when people's well-being and sense of safety feels threatened? As we all know too well, the socio-political context that we're facing these days is heavy, certainly rife with obstacles and setbacks. Nationally, many of us have been dismayed at seeing the layoffs, the funding cuts, the antipathy toward immigrants, DEI initiatives, and public sector workers. In our organization, where we serve a majority of immigrant families, caregivers are reluctant to sign up their children for overnight camps because they fear for their safety. We've been impacted by the elimination of our AmeriCorps workers, and our federally funded SNAP-Ed grant is now on the chopping block. None of us are immune, and these are stark reminders that our progress is never guaranteed. But here at Yes, we believe in the power of leadership, in the power of our values and in the power of community action, how change is possible when we come together with hope and a shared vision of the future. And so today we've brought together change makers across parks, philanthropy, education, and youth leadership who are holding tight to this shared vision and forging ahead with hope despite the many challenges. Our goal is to reflect together on how we rise to meet this moment, to celebrate what is working, and to build momentum towards what's next. So before we begin, I'd like to let everyone know that this panel is being recorded for our purposes. It will be sent out to you afterwards, as well as to a handful of folks who were unable to join. It is not being recorded by AI. Secondly, as a participant, you have access to join by video, but not by audio, because we're anticipating several people on this call, over 100. That being said, you'll have the opportunity to use the chat and question and answer boxes, which will be monitored throughout the session and that we'll come back around to at the end. Okay, so with that said, I'd like to start the way we typically start our YES programming and meetings, with a land acknowledgement and grounding. For us here today in Richmond, we acknowledge that we are currently on the stolen lands of the Muwekma Ohlone, Chochenyo-speaking people. They are the original inhabitants of this land that we now call Richmond and have cared for this area generation after generation. It is important that we continue to honor their legacy by doing our part to preserve and protect these lands and biodiversity, by acknowledging this history to prevent the erasure of the Indigenous people and their way of living. And for those of you who are elsewhere, I invite you to recognize and acknowledge the native land that you're on as well. Now I'd like to move us into just a minute of grounding exercise. I know a lot of us are in transition right now. It's the end of the day. So I invite you to begin by either sitting comfortably with your feet flat on the ground or standing tall with your arms relaxed by your sides. Go ahead and close your eyes or soften your gaze. Take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. Feel your chest and belly expand, and exhale gently through your mouth. Let your shoulders drop. Take a second deep breath. Notice the feeling of your clothes on your skin, the air on your face. Exhale slowly, releasing any tension in your jaw, neck, or hands. Take your third deep breath. Feel the ground beneath your feet or the support of your chair. Exhale fully, settling into this moment. And lastly, scan your body gently from head to toe, noticing where you feel tightness, lightness, warmth, sensation. Wriggle your fingers and toes, and when you're ready, open your eyes and return to the space around you. Okay, thank you. Before I introduce the panelists, I'd like to take a moment to introduce YES to those of you who may not know our work. YES is a place-based nonprofit rooted in Richmond, California, an industrial city shaped by the Chevron refinery, the World War II shipyards, and generations of migration. It's one of the most diverse and vibrant communities in the state, and also one that continues to face the impacts of industrialization and redlining. YES began 25 years ago as a summer camp program for Richmond youth, creating access to nature for young people growing up just miles from the bay, but who were often unable to reach it. Since then, we've evolved into a year-round leadership organization, engaging youth, adults, and families over the span of 7 years on average. We've nurtured confidence, connection, and community power through outdoor experiences for more than 14,000 residents over the years. And now we're on the cusp of building a new base camp, a nature-infused community center for youth and adult leaders right in the heart of Richmond. We're excited to share a bit more about this project with you later in the program, as we see it as a real sign of progress and affirmation and a cause for hope. Okay, and now I'm pleased to introduce our extraordinary panel of leaders. Jon Jarvis is the former director of the National Park Service under President Obama, and he's now the chair of UC Berkeley's Institute for Parks, People, and Biodiversity. Throughout his career, he's been a powerful voice for protecting public lands and access for all. Armando Quintero is the director of the California Department of Parks and Recreation. He leads the largest state park system in the country and has championed efforts to make California's 280 state parks more accessible, inclusive, and reflective of the communities they serve. Craig Strang is the Associate Director Emeritus of the Lawrence Hall of Science, and he's the co-founder of the California Environmental Literacy Initiative. Craig has spent decades integrating science and environmental literacy into school systems nationally and internationally. More recently, he has been a key leader in the statewide California Campaign for Outdoor Learning. Hannah Schulman is with the Schmidt Family Foundation and serves as program director for the N Squared Nature and Nurture program at the 11th Hour Project. Hannah oversees grant making that enables access and opportunity for youth to thrive through nature. And last but not least is Ian, who is a YES youth leader. Ian is a freshman in high school who has been actively engaged in YES's 10-year leadership pathway for the past 4 years. He has been an outspoken advocate here at YES for what youth leadership in nature can look like. He'll also share a special look at YES's next chapter. And just again, one logistical note before we dive in. Throughout the panel, feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, noting if they are intended for any panelist in particular. And then at the end, we'll address as many questions as possible with the time that we have. Okay, so let's jump in. We'll start with you, Jon. We already know that the National Park Service is facing one of its most challenging moments right now with devastating cuts to its personnel and services. Pivoting toward the positive for a moment, can you share some of the Park Service programs that were created during your tenure, which have contributed to more people having access to the outdoors?
Oh, thanks, Eric, and thanks everybody for joining us today, and particularly this fantastic panel. When I came to California as the regional director in 2002, I kind of had the blinding flash of the obvious as I rode BART every day into Oakland, where the office was, and experienced the extraordinary diversity we have here in California, at least in the Bay Area, and drove across the Central Valley to Yosemite. And it was a completely different demographic inside of the park. And so I recognized that this was something that needed to change, that our parks and our public lands needed to be a component of every person's life. And so when I became director, working with an extraordinary team and partners, we really launched a whole series of programs to sort of build this idea of a ladder of engagement. One of those was the Every Kid in a Park Pass, which I battled through the attorneys to get free access to every fourth grader in the nation and their families for a full year, looking at that as an investment in that generation. Working with support funding for the many conservation corps and other youth-serving organizations out there wherever we could, particularly with some startups like Latino Outdoors and Outdoors Afro, and then long-standing ones like Nature Bridge and Yes and others to help them sort of connect with that sort of high school middle cohort. And then we looked at, as I like to say, you go to national parks or maybe even state parks on vacation, but where do you go after dinner? And so where do you create new parks in the urban landscape? So we were able, working with Congress, to carve out a portion of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is the revenue from Outer Continental Shelf oil leasing, into something called the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Program, which is about 150,000, which is not enough. I mean, 150 million, sorry, 150 million a year for investments in communities to create open space parklands near home. There are a number of other things we did. We launched the Healthy Parks, Healthy People initiative here in the US, stealing it from Australia, of course, but really connecting with the public health agencies to literally work with doctors to prescribe nature as a part of their program. So there are many of those that were, and as far as I know, they're all still intact. I mean, Every Kid in a Park got legislated into Every Kid Outdoors. The Land and Water Conservation Fund is not subject to appropriation. So a lot of these programs are still there, and hopefully we can see them continue in spite of the current administration.
Thanks, John. Thank you. That sets the stage really well. And building on that for our next question, I have an executive director colleague in Richmond who says that one of our favorite places to scroll and read uplifting accounts right now is the Alt NPS Facebook page, which some of you may know, and those of you who are on Facebook, I encourage you to check it out. Can you share how the National Park Service has evolved to become what we might think of today as one of the more progressive government institutions?
Yeah,
Those
I
are my
think that,
words.
yeah, I've always been a bit proud of the Park Service in its fearlessness to address particularly complicated issues like climate change or slavery, the civil rights movement, and the like. We did a deep dive and looked at the places in our country that we have set aside as historic, National Register, National Historic Landmarks, historical sites, and less than 10% represent the contributions of women and people of color. And so we launched a campaign under President Obama to identify those missing components of the American story and add them, to protect them, to build their interpretation and conservation. So Harriet Tubman, Freedom Riders, the Stonewall Inn, the beginning and sort of turning point in the LGBTQ plus rights movement. Charles Young, Buffalo Soldiers, Birmingham. You're just going to run down the list. The Frank Kameny House, gay rights movement in the DC area. So all of these were added to the National Park Service or to the National Register of Historic Places as places that we can tell authentically the American story. These are American stories. They are not African American stories or Asian American stories. They are American stories. And so far, they're still existing. There is a threat by the administration to dump them to the states. I'm not convinced the states are willing to take them, right, Armando? But that's the current state of affairs.
Thanks for that, John. Yeah, though, when we were talking ahead of time, ahead of this panel, that really gave me hope. And I did not realize that it was such a low number to begin with. But when I think of the places that folks who I know in my work, places they're choosing to visit are those places that you've named. And so there's so much meaning and depth and acknowledgement of identity in those spaces. I guess my final question for you is what gives you hope for the Park Service right now? And what do we do to ensure that our national parks survive and thrive in the face of some of this talk around privatization and movement and different things?
So I had the opportunity when I was director to be there for the centennial, the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service, and it was a great celebration of this long legacy of parks. We ran a campaign called Find Your Park, and people did. They came out to not only the national parks, but the state parks and community parks as well. COVID reminded people that the outdoors is one of the safest places to go. So we hosted in that year 320 million visitors. That's more than all of Disney, national baseball, basketball, football, soccer combined, roughly equivalent to the population of the United States. And they weren't all Democrats. They were all political persuasions came to these places. So that base of support is still there, and it's there amongst our partners and our advocates and our volunteers. And we need them to speak up. I think that's the bottom line is right now we can't be sitting back and just hoping for the future. Hope is not a strategy. We need a strategy that will empower and unify the many, many components out there that care about these places for their children's children.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for that perspective. And I'm sure we'll have some additional questions about what we see on a national level to give us some hope. So we'll hopefully come back around to you here in the Q&A. With that being said, I want to turn it over to Armando now. And Armando, so much of your recent work as the director of the California Department of Parks and Rec has been to ensure that California state parks reflect our state's diverse population by creating and implementing policies that give people that sense of belonging when they visit the parks. Can you tell me a little bit about what have the state parks instituted since your arrival 5 years ago to foster that feeling of belonging? And again, what challenges do our parks face these next few years?
Thank you, Eric, and also thank you, John. Excuse me, when I first started in this role 4.5 years ago, I had not worked for state parks before. I'd worked for national parks and a number of other organizations, including the University of California at Merced, and I'd served on the Water Commission for the state and things like that. So I came in excited about taking a fresh look at this organization. Shortly after arriving, something that I discovered that just opened my eyes wide is that State Parks has an office called, the Office of Grants and Local Services. And that office distributes funds every year from things like the Land and Water Conservation Fund, from propositions, from bond initiatives. And that office has been in existence since 1968. And there are well over 1,000 communities in California who have received grants to build parks and recreation centers and things like that. And these are park poor communities. And since 1968, they've been supported by the state park system. And when I arrived in this office, I didn't know that. And as I talked to legislators, it turned out the legislators didn't know that either. So we moved from being silent to being visible. And in fact, in 2021, there was a combination of funding that came together from various sources. And in that year, in one announcement, we announced $548 million that would be spread across California for these park poor communities. I contacted the governor's office and the secretary's office. And when we had made the decisions on who was getting the grants, we invited everybody to a Zoom call that was publicized. It was the most joyful and tearful announcement that I have ever participated in. And our grants office does an amazing job of working with communities because these poor communities tend to have the least resources to be competitive for grants. So our grants offices work with these communities, help them develop their grants so that there is grant proposals, so they're as competitive as possible. And one story that really struck out and gives you a sense of the moment, with all these recipient communities on screen, there was a park planner from a very tiny community, and I don't remember the name of it, but she said that in their planning efforts, an 8-year-old girl was so excited to be a part of the planning of her new park, where that was going to include a skate park, that she designed a feature called the Twinkie. And this city planner was the only one for this community, said, because of your grant, that Twinkie's getting built. And so part of what we're doing is getting the word out that state parks, with various sorts of funding, has put money into communities across the state. So while we may have 280 California state parks, when you combine all the community parks that have been funded by these efforts, it's quite a few more state park investments in California. That grants program.
Armando,
yeah.
Thank you so much for that. The story, I think, really, we all felt the impact, right, at the local level when you have such a big program, sometimes you don't get to see the fruits of the labor at the state level, and you were able to make that happen, and California was able to make that happen.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I was just going to move us on to the next question, and feel free to round out the final thought here, but this may dovetail. So can you highlight some of the initiatives and partnerships that you're working on to make our state parks more inclusive and accessible, and that you hope will continue or expect to continue in the future?
Sure. Well, one of the things that we've done is we've done a lot of work with tribes across California, and presently we have 14 co-management agreements with tribes across California, and those co-management agreements cover 54% of state park lands. And we have a number of additional consultations going on with tribes to continue an increase in that number of acreage covered by these co-management agreements. Jon mentioned the Park Pass programs that were created by National Parks, the fourth grade Adventure Pass being one. We took that idea and applied it to California. Next year, we expect that there will be at least 100,000 fourth grade graders who are getting these passes, where we have had interpreters develop fourth grade curriculum programs at 54 state parks. And of course, that was modeled after the National Park Service. We also have something called the Golden Bear Pass. And individuals in California who are eligible for the Department of Social Services support can get these passes for free. In the past, it was a complex application process. We smoothed that out by working with DSS. And in the past, maybe we put out about 1,000 of those passes a year. This year, we put out 100,000 Golden Bear passes to low-income families that gives them free access to parks. Another thing that we did, which was that we worked with the legislator to create something called a library pass, and we distributed 33,000 library passes to all the libraries across California, including tribal libraries. And what we did with all these passes is they all have a QR code where people can voluntarily take a survey, which tells us who they are and what they know, what they've done, what they think of their experience. And we know that in all these cases, most of these families make less than $60,000 a year in California. So it's a perfect target audience. But the other thing that's really wonderful is that librarians across the state have reported that this is the most commonly checked out item in their libraries. And also, many have commented that people are checking out books when they come to the libraries to learn about the parks that they're visiting. So it's really wonderful to see the unintended consequences of these things. And another thing that I'll say, and then I'll stop, and that is that the surveys have shown us that many people, certainly people with low incomes, didn't realize how inexpensive it was to get into a park. We literally had a number of people say, I thought it was going to be as expensive as it is to go to Disneyland as it is to get into a park. And that's what had prevented their visiting. So we're doing a lot, I think, to really increase, the folks who are coming into state parks, and also understanding the reach that state parks has in their communities and across the state. And I will say finally that we have a tagline for State Parks Week, which we started 3 years ago. And I love this. And the tagline is, "This is where you live." And that's how I want Californians to think about the public lands of California. No matter where they are, you did the breathing exercise at the beginning of this conversation. I like to think that people can pause, think about an incredible outdoor space in the state that they've experienced or want to experience, and that can have the same impact as a calming breathing exercise.
Thank you so much, Armando.
Sure.
I love the way that the state parks is thinking about access for everyone. I know you also mentioned when we spoke about these new brochures and maps and different things that are going out that'll be more enticing for folks and up to date. I'll never forget when one of our first outings with Yes, we've worked for a long time with the East Bay Regional Park District, and all of us got to the top of a hill on a night hike, and our leader said, okay, when I count to 3 and I ask you, whose parks are these? You shout, "Our parks," because we're all paying for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all paying for the maintenance of these parks, and it's something that we love, and certainly appreciate all the work that you're doing at the state level to make sure to maintain accessible. Okay, so we could talk about this for days, but we're going to move on to our next panelist here. Craig, it's a pleasure to have you. You are our furthest panelist afield here, calling in from Sweden, where it's just about 2 o'clock in the morning. So thank you so much for being here. So many young people don't get consistent outdoor education or access to natural outdoor spaces anymore, which we know from all of the research, there's a real benefit when we do. But that being said, a lot of us remember, like the 5th grade overnight camp or experiences like it as an important staple in our childhood. You're part of a statewide group now that's looking to change that reality so that every child in California can have a range of experiences that exposes them to the outdoors and its myriad benefits. Can you tell us why outdoor education and access is seemingly deprioritized in our education system, and how do we make it a priority?
Yeah, not such an easy question to answer, Eric, but we have a large and growing body of evidence from research that when kids spend time learning outdoors in safe, healthy, beautiful places, their learning accelerates, their attention improves, their ability to focus and concentrate improves, their self-regulation improves, their general well-being improves. And at the same time, when kids spend time outdoors, there's research evidence showing that symptoms dramatically decrease from things like ADHD, hypertension, obesity, anxiety, childhood depression, viral infection, even nearsightedness, and screen time. So we know all these things. And we know that all the good things that nature provides for us and all the bad things that nature protects us from impact disproportionately the most vulnerable, most marginalized kids in our state. We know that. At the same time, we as a society hold this mental model, this set of assumptions around what it means to be in school. And our school system was designed at a time when kids spent almost all their time exploring and playing outdoors, and you went to school to not do that, to learn in a different way. And we have this idea now, very durable mental model that real learning, meaningful learning, important learning takes place when you're sitting at a desk in a classroom, not even looking out the window. And so we have to find ways to reconcile these contradictory ideas that we hold in such durable ways in our society. So I'm working with 10 Strands and a bunch of other organizations around the state we've started this large coalition made up of doctors, pediatricians, epidemiologists, mental health researchers, language and literacy people, science and environmental educators, education researchers, who are all coming together to speak with one very loud voice, if we can make it loud, to advocate for legislation and significant funding from the state that would ensure that every kid in California, every year from kindergarten through 12th grade, but beginning with those most vulnerable kids in our communities, would all spend 20 to 25% of their school hours learning outdoors. And we think that's a reasonable target in a state like California. And we think that that time can take place on green schoolyards, on walking field trips in neighborhoods to local parks, to longer field trips where you might need a bus to get to one of Armando's places. And we think that every kid should have the experience of going to a week-long overnight residential outdoor science school. And we think that bringing together all these stakeholders and fields and disciplines will allow us to get the attention of the legislature and the governor and really make this happen.
Great, Craig. Kudos to you and everybody who's been a part of this effort. I had the opportunity to be with you a couple of weeks ago out in the Central Valley, where we were talking to the director of Department of Education, who seems to be on board, and others who really are behind this idea. So keep at it. You focused a lot of your work on researching and designing curriculum for outdoor providers that's relevant and inclusive for the students they engage. From your standpoint, how does YES's work and others like YES and our focus on inclusion and equity fit into the statewide vision for outdoor learning?
Yeah. So the work that I've done in my career and my colleagues at Lawrence Hall of Science and 10 Strands and other organizations, the work that we do is in the category of being a support provider. We design curriculum materials, develop professional development programs for educators, advocate for legislation, do research, provide consulting. And our role is to support organizations and school systems to get better, to improve what they're doing. And when I travel around California and around the country and work with organizations and school systems, the most common question that I get is, can you show me some place where this is actually happening? Like, we've been working at this for so long and we have not been successful. We're not sure it's possible. Can you show me an organization or a place that has actually built an inclusive, welcoming work environment that works in their community, that delivers inclusive, welcoming, pedagogically sound, highly effective education programs in their community? And I always say, take a look at Yes Nature to Neighborhoods. It's really one of the best examples of programs like this in the country, and you're doing the work on the ground, providing the proof of concept that is so important, the reality proof, serving as a leading edge exemplar, as a model for programs around the state and around the country. And I just want to say that I think one of the important aspects of your work is not only that you've been successful at working within your communities and developing a diverse staff, but that your success is not entirely exclusively dependent on one or two charismatic leaders or one or two huge donors that just believe in your work. Your leadership is amazing. I'm not diminishing that, but I think that the magic of what you've done is that you've very methodically and systemically come up with policies and practices that you enact, that you reflect on, that you improve, and you document them and share them with the rest of the community. And that elevates your work from being a successful organization that feels like a one-off that nobody else could achieve to being an organization that's setting the bar with best practices and allowing other organizations to learn from and replicate the work that you're doing. And I think that is absolutely essential and extraordinary.
Thanks, Craig. Thank you so much. That means a lot. And a lot of that credit goes to Blanca Hernandez, our Director of Programs and Partnerships, who's worked with you and the Hall and many others for several years now. She's so dedicated to the pedagogy and the curriculum and the evaluation pieces that, are sometimes not the sexiest thing to have to do when you're running a program. Everyone wants to be out there, doing the work in the field, but it does make a difference in terms of the long-term growth and impact that we're all trying to make here. So thank you for that. Okay, we're going to move over to, speaking of philanthropy, we're going to move over to Hannah Schulman, who joins us today from the Schmidt Family Foundation. Hannah, I'm excited to bring you into this conversation since you draw not only on your years of experience working in philanthropy, but also your experience leading programs for San Francisco Parks and Rec and also Education Outside. So you've seen the challenges from both sides of the table. And I think our audience would be interested in hearing what you have to say. Can you say a little more about why does the 11th Hour Project and Schmidt prioritize the outdoors?
Thanks, Eric, for the question. And hi to see you. Nice to see you all today. It's really lovely to be on this panel. As Craig was mentioning, we know that science and our own bodies tell us the outdoors has incredible benefits for our mental health and well-being, including the increased happiness, reduction of stress, and deepening a sense of connectedness. And yet we know, as Jon and Armando were talking about with their programming, that youth of color in particular are 3 times more likely to be denied access to the benefits the outdoors provides due to racial and economic disparities. We know that parks in communities of color are half the size of parks serving majority white populations and 5 times as crowded. So we know, though, that nature is also a human right and it's critical for youth development. The science of learning and development currently tells us that in order to thrive, young people must develop a strong sense of their own identity and believe they belong throughout all the environments they inhabit. And we here at the 11th Hour Project think the outdoors is a great place for all of us, but especially young people of color and their families to be able to develop identity, belonging, and really like meaning through their connection to the outdoors. We think that by supporting outdoor equity and redefining what meaningful engagement in nature does for youth, we can change the dominant narrative about who belongs outside and what it looks like for young people to connect and thrive through and with the outdoors. More than ever right now, that feels important around people having access to the outdoors to heal, ground, and connect in this particular time. And we really believe more than anything that weaving water and land connection into the way we build strong youth and communities is a super integral way that we can restore a balanced relationship between people and planet.
Thanks, Hannah. For you, you've been in your role for a while now, and you connect with a lot of folks in Bay Area philanthropy and beyond, I would imagine. What approaches are you seeing in the field that are most promising and most effective in terms of gaining outdoor access and also making sure that organizations like YES and other direct service providers continue to be able to do the work that they're doing?
Absolutely. I think there's a couple different ways we've really seen this develop. Over Jon's tenure at MPS and Armando's work with state parks and Craig really and all the entities you've been working with, we've seen a lot of different types of environmental education and nature connection programs start to grow. Many of the folks who are practicing different ways of doing that are on this call today. Certainly, we've seen more of a diversification in the field, and that looks really exciting. There are a couple of ways I've seen this develop in the past couple of years. One is that we're really looking at youth and their families connecting to the outdoors in culturally relevant ways. So as Armando mentioned, particularly with tribal entities or Native American-led organizations that we work with, there are young people and their communities who are getting out really focused on land and water-based healing and learning. This is a modality by which they're addressing mental health, natural resource management, intergenerational knowledge keeping, and really identity development. For example, we work with a group that's training up young folks in the northern part of the state to learn how to whitewater kayak and advocate for dam removal as a part of reclaiming ancestral waterways along the Klamath River. So we're seeing cultural relevancy for young people and their families as a really big way that young people connect with the outdoors. We're also seeing the outdoors growing as a place for leadership and civic engagement, much more than sort of a direct service opportunity that's a one-off. So YES is a great example of this. Through the leadership pathways that you do, these Richmond area youth and their families are connected to each other, they're connected to health, they're motivated to change themselves and their neighborhoods, and really develop a strong community. I think we see in the work a real connection for YES, seeing the value of the outdoors as a place for youth development, social network building, and community organizing. And it's for the Richmond community by the Richmond community. And that's, I think, something else we're really seeing as a real new phase that I think a lot of this work is moving into. Armando mentioned it a little bit, but communities of color in particular, I think, really saw the outdoors as a place that was both challenging and had real opportunity, particularly in the pandemic. And we've seen an explosion in nonprofits and organizations of communities of color going out and enjoying the outdoors since the pandemic. So California, for example, has a growing body of organizations that are reclaiming surfing, which is a traditional Polynesian sport for youth of color and their families. And some of these organizations have banded together to create, for instance, a surf justice collective, really committed to advocacy and equity for ocean access for the coast. So we're seeing a lot of really exciting work around that place in particular. The last thing I'd say is a sort of new approach is I think there's just been a huge amount of explosion of bills at the national level or across the nation at the state level around the outdoors as a policy solution. So in 2018, less than half the states of the nation had introduced any bills around outdoor access and engagement. And by 2024, almost every single state in the nation has introduced a bill around this. Between 2022 and 2023, the number of bills introduced had tripled. So I think we're seeing organizations start to see that, because also state legislators, their constituents and their communities are really seeing the outdoors as an important part of how communities can thrive. So I feel like those are all really exciting opportunities as we're seeing the field change and shift.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see a lot of nodding heads. Yeah, thank you for that, Hannah, and for raising up kind of the national profile around what's happening around the outdoors, and also how organizations like YES and others around us are shifting the way that we think about our advocacy efforts. It's not just about getting kids outside. It's about making change at state or even national levels.
Absolutely.
We have time just for one more quick question. I know it could be a deep dive, but could you say just maybe a little bit more around how philanthropy continue to move the needle toward outdoor equity? I know many of us in this call are grant funded or donor funded. What role can philanthropy play, especially during this time, to continue to move that needle?
I think there are two major ways I think that can happen. I think one of the things we've really seen is in the past few years, public-private partnerships being a really critical way to trial new policies, support new public dollars moving towards these efforts. So examples of that include outdoor equity funds across the nation, including California's, as well as things like soda taxes being used to support programming that supports outdoor engagement. So I think philanthropy really has a role to play in growing new ideas and trialing solutions that need the public-private partnerships with nonprofit organizations firmly in the driver's seat to really get that to go. And finally, I think we know we want the outdoors to continue to be seen as a solution really around policy outcomes that come from everything around equity to mental and physical health, economic development, climate resilience. And we need to fund organizations that prioritize the outdoors as a part of their work, whether it's for recreation or climate change, racial justice, or cultural connection. We need all these organizations to exist so that we can continue to build the momentum towards a movement that supports outdoor equity. Within the C3 limits, grantees like ours, YES, and other folks on this call engage communities to provide testimony and help shape policy that works for them, from accessing federal funds to increasing local public funding and representation. I think getting these organizations the kind of general operating funds they need so that they can best support communities to speak up about what's best for them is a powerful move we can do right now in philanthropy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Hannah. Okay, well, before we turn our attention to Ian, our final panelist and our youth leader here at YES, I'd like to share with you a video that showcases our initiative to build a new community center for leaders here in Richmond. You'll have the chance to see Ian and his peers in the video and also offer some nice context for what Ian will then share. And I think Rosa is going to bring up our video now. We know that nearly everyone's well-being improves when they're connected to the land, to Mother Earth. When we learn the history of the land and ecosystems that thrive when land is healthy, when we learn the practices and traditions of the indigenous people here before us and who are with us today, when we learn about the environment and become fascinated by it, that's when we become stewards and nature becomes a resource that we cherish and seek to protect. Nature is everywhere, even in our urban settings, but some areas have less access than others. Despite Richmond being surrounded by more shoreline than any other city in the Bay Area, it lacks green space in its urban core.
YES seeks to provide access for folks who have historically been excluded from the outdoors and from leadership opportunities. YES has 2 leadership programs. One is for youth, one is for adults.
I'm part of a Rangers program, which is a program where kids my age, all races, we go camping, we go on hikes, and we're just able to enjoy all of nature. With YES, it's introduced me to many different places that I would never have even known of. It's made me love being outdoors, and it's just been an amazing experience.
I've been involved with YES for 16 years now. YES has definitely influenced me from such a young age. Every single time I'm doing anything that's community-oriented is definitely surrounded by what YES has taught me. Without Yes, many people wouldn't have a place to go that's inclusive as far as taking people different places and giving people opportunities that they may have never had. It's a beautiful thing.
Adult programming focuses on public speaking, learning about systems, and being advocates.
When I came back to do my second year in the leadership program, I was able to start a nonprofit of my own called the Black Parent Resource Center. It really impacted me to be able to start the nonprofit and do the work that I've done. That was all through the support of the Yes community. They have been like family to me.
Yes is nurturing leaders who champion their own well-being and that of the community.
The challenge and limitation that Yes currently faces is that we are growing. The number of people we're engaging just no longer fit into our space. Our hub, where community members come together to learn, where youth stop by after school to check in, and where we prepare for all of our outdoor adventures. It's ideally located along a major thoroughfare, McDonald Avenue, and it's directly across from Nickel Park, where we host many of our programs. Our space is cramped, the facilities are aging, and it's a logistical challenge when more than one group of participants needs a meeting space. We've loved this facility and made magic happen here despite the limitations for over 12 years. But now time has come for change.
Leaders need and deserve spaces that complement the joy and awe that they find in nature. That's why Yes is building a home for our leaders, a base camp. Its design will double the number of participants who access our on-site programming. We'll create workshop spaces for partners. We'll have a gear storage so we can launch all of our overnight programming directly from our base camp.
Oh my gosh, there's going to be so much more participants. So the space is definitely going to expand on what Yes has been doing for 25 years.
Now with a bigger campus, we're going to be able to have multiple activities and we're going to be able to enjoy our time better at the building.
Everyone deserves the opportunity to be outdoors and thrive from the myriad health benefits that nature provides. Everyone also deserves to have people around them who support their positive development and expose them to new experiences and new ideas so that they can lead.
We are here to diversify that environmental movement and bring in justice, equity, and belonging.
Alongside you, now we have a chance to build a foundation for Yes in our community. Join us today by becoming a Yes Basecamp contributor. Your investment will result in a foundation that will inspire the next generation of community leaders.
All right, Ian, we're going to turn it over to you. Thank you for being a part of that video. You've changed your hair since then.
Yeah.
You're looking great. Okay, so first off, can you talk a little bit about how you've been involved in Yes, and then tell us what has that experience meant to you personally?
Well, I had a taste of Yes right before COVID struck when I went to winter camp for the first time. Then I really got involved with Yes after COVID in 2022, which is when I joined the Richmond Rangers program, which is the second tier of the youth leadership pathway. And what it did is it opened up a whole new world of nature for me. Now, what happens during our time there is we partner closely with the East Bay Regional Park District, where we go to a number of different regional parks. And to further build on the statement I said of a whole new world, I was able to do things I've never would even imagine doing. I was able to go camping for the first time. I was able to go backpacking for the first time. I was able to learn how to start a fire, learn how to set up a tent. These are things that our community, they don't usually experience, or if they experience it later on their own time and they have to end up paying for it. Now, once my time with Rangers was up, it sparked a sense of activism in me as I was able to see the beautiful spaces that nature has to offer. And you want to make sure that you're able to conserve these for future generations to enjoy, regardless of income or race. Then I became an assistant with the Discovery Squad, where I was able to take what I learned from Rangers and apply them to teaching kids these same skills. I was able to teach them how to set up a tent, how to start a fire, then basic principles in nature, such as leave no trace. Now, currently, I'm with the youth engagement team, which is a third tier of the youth leadership pathway, and it builds on everything I've learned previously, and it puts it even more into practice. Right now, we're currently working on a park beautification project at Nickel Park, which is a park in Richmond that's been hurting for a while, and it's allowed us to go out and talk to people in the community. People go to the park the most and ask them, what do you want to see here? What do you think this park is lacking? And then we're also able to see the imbalances low-income communities face in the section of park quality. And we've done a lot of work already in Nickel Park. We've been able to add a mural on the front of the bathrooms, and we've also been able to add a garden in inside Nickel Park. So it's made the park more beautiful. We've been able to reflect the identity of Richmond in a park.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you for giving us that overview of the pathway, and just you've been such an inspiration to all of us and to a lot of the other peers in your program who have kind of traveled the pathway with you. Can you say a little bit more about why does having a permanent space like our base camp center, what does that mean to you? What does it matter? What does it mean to your peers? What does it matter or mean to a community like Richmond?
Well, I think firstly, it provides parents with the ease and knowledge that when they put their children in this program, they're going to be safe, and it's a real program that they'll be able to enjoy and they'll be able to cherish and maybe tell their friends about it later on. And then it also allows for greater interconnectivity with our kids and people from different cultural backgrounds in Richmond. And I say the youth specifically because I don't think we can talk about having a better Richmond without greatly focusing on the youth. These people are the future of our community. They'll be the future political opponents, and they'll be the future people in the workforce.
Absolutely. I think we've got time for just another question or two. You know, you've been a part of this process since back in 2022 when it started with our visioning sessions with the community. What's that been like, knowing that the construction of this facility will start later this fall?
Well, I mean, it's been great because honestly, yes, could use the more space. I mean, every year, yes, grows. We see more and more new faces come, which is great. But we honestly want to make sure that we're able to have a great space for people to come, where we're able to accommodate these new faces. We're able to make sure that everyone has an equal great experience with it.
And then I know when we spoke before, you were telling me a little bit about your own leadership journey. I know you're only a freshman, but you're aspirational. So can you tell us a little bit about what's on the horizon for you, and how do you see Yes as part of your continuing leadership journey?
Well, because of Yes, it sparked an interest in climate justice. And over the summer, I'll be having a climate justice internship with the Rose Foundation. After that, I'll be going to China for 3 weeks, and I hope to put in the practices that I've learned from Yes and this climate justice internship into talking with people from China, learning what they've done with climate change, learning what they've done with pollution. And then long term, really long term, I'd look to go into politics and try to help out communities that need it the most with coming up with ideas that reflect the identity of the community to make sure that we're able to ensure the best possible life quality for them.
That's awesome, Ian. Well, again, we're so grateful and glad that we're part of your leadership journey, that you've chosen to be a part of Yes, you and your family. And yeah.
Yeah, well, it's been my pleasure.
Can't wait to see what comes next.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So that concludes sort of the panel portion of our roundtable here. And we want to take the next 14 minutes or so and open it up to questions. So again, thanks everyone for your patience. I know we've explored a lot of ground. We've covered ground. We didn't get to some of the topics that we wanted to, but I'm going to turn it over to Devika now. And I know she's been grabbing questions. Are there some questions, Devika, that we can share with our panelists, either individually or as a group, and we can direct them?
Sure, that sounds great, Eric. So I'll start with one that's kind of broad. What action can advocates and individuals take to help strengthen the positive programs that are improving access to the outdoors? And that can be really for anyone who wants to jump in.
So a question around specific actions. I think we're in time of people wanting to do something. Would anyone like to take that one on? Yeah, go ahead, John. You go for it.
There we go. Yeah, I'll give it a shot, at least as a start. I think one thing is we're all advocating within silos. Conservation community, sort of advocating for nature conservation, environmental justice over here doing their thing, public health kind of doing their thing. And I think one thing is we could reach across that silo, that aisle, or whatever you want to call it, and create some connectivity, create some collaboration create some cooperation of working together towards these common goals. The part of the problem is everybody's sort of feeling like they're under assault at the same time. And that's frankly intentional by the current administration. But that's a divide and conquer approach. And I think that what we can do for public access is to unify our approach, to come to, there's great, one of my old favorite quotes from my friend Luther Probst is, there's great strength in strange bedfellows. And there's an opportunity to build that kind of strength through reaching out and building a much broader base of coalition around these common goals.
Yeah, thank you, Jon. Yeah, Craig, I'm interested to hear from you around this question because you are bringing together a lot of advocates who are taking action. Right now, this feels like it's somewhat contained in certain circles. What is it going to take for, legislative action, for example, to happen? How much further does this need to extend, and how can we as individuals and activists in our own right be a part of that?
Yeah, well, I think Jon really hit the nail on the head there, and I think the opportunity for strange bedfellows is huge in our particular field. There are very few Republicans or Democrats who think it's a bad idea for kids to spend more time outdoors. That's not really a thing, that people think that you're healthier and smarter and stronger and more productive if you spend all your time indoors looking at a screen. In Oregon and Washington, they have, in both states, passed outdoor school for all initiatives that received a majority of approval by both Republican and Democrat voters. So, so I think politically, there's an opportunity here for us to do something unusual. And then there's this idea of strange bedfellows across disciplines and across fields, which we're working on in our coalition. We're finding that medical researchers that do studies on the impact of kids spending time outdoors and decreasing symptoms of ADHD don't really talk to education researchers who study learning. And they don't even really use the same methods or the same study approaches and hardly know how to talk to each other. So we're having convenings to bring together these researchers and practitioners across many different fields to look at the intersection between health benefits and learning benefits. So I think it's a universal truth that we can build this this broader coalition that Jon's referring to, and there's a lot of nuance to doing it in a lot of different ways, and we can all sort of play a role in bringing people together in the ways that we're able to.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Devika to see if we've got a couple more questions here.
We do. The next question is from Beth, who asked a question of Hannah. How do you see funding for all of these programs when so much is being cut at the federal level? For example, the gardening program in prisons received a large US EPA grant to do environmental climate justice programming across California, but then the funding was pulled. How is philanthropy stepping in at these times?
I can't speak for all philanthropy, Beth, but I can certainly try to speak for some corner of the world. I think certainly there's not enough money in all of philanthropy to support the federal cuts that have been made, and that is like really stark reality. That said, I think there's a real opportunity for philanthropy to continue to stay the course of what they were doing, if not increase the amount of funding that they're able to give out at this point in time. And I think that's really the challenge and opportunity that I think philanthropy has to face now. In particular, I think that means looking at creative opportunities, bedfellows, if that's the metaphor we're going for in this conversation, creative opportunities to strategize with other philanthropies or other funders or public-private partnerships to see how to strengthen and continue the impact of those programs that we know we need now more than ever.
Great. Anna. Devika?
I think Armando has his hand up.
Oh,
Yeah, I wanted to
go
mention
ahead.
that with the Prop 4 monies this fall, we're going to be announcing $190 million in community grants. And our grants and local Office of Grants and Local Services contact them. And there will be an announcement sometime this fall. And so anyway, just wanted to make sure you all know that. And they can talk to you about the requirements and will also assist in the development of applications, as I mentioned earlier.
Thanks.
And I would also encourage groups to look for matching funds when they get things like that. You know, a lot of folks think that they're going to get all the funding for the project they want from one pot. And I would really encourage a broader thinking of engaging communities and supporting those. I think of them as seed monies really for great opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Armando. And we will provide the resource to the state parks website so that folks have that access.
All right, we've got another question. This one is for Armando. This is from Diane. She asks, what is happening with grants from the Coastal Conservancy and DBW funding in the context of our current administration?
I'm not sure if you're asking about the federal funds for those groups. We are seeing some reduction in federal funding. We don't really know the impacts of that yet. DBW does do grants to support things like developing boat access, life vest programs, free life vests at swimming areas and beaches. So I would contact both of those groups. DBW is within state parks. That's the Division of Boating and Waterways. And anybody who's interested in that topic, I would contact them directly. The Coastal Conservancy, they are separate from us, and I don't know their status.
Gotcha. Great. The next question is from Olivia, and she's asking, how can biodiversity goals and conservation focus that agencies in CNRA, especially like 30-30, sorry, I don't know all the lingo, so I'm sorry if I'm messing this up. 30-30 can cross over with outdoor equity and access. What opportunities, time for staff, and processes do you see to help break down those silos across disciplines?
I mean, I can address a little bit of that. Just today, I spoke with folks, the person who runs 30 by 30, which is the target is to preserve 30% of California's wildlands by 2030. Right now, they're at 25% plus. State Parks is working on that initiative, as are the other divisions within, or the other departments within the Natural Resources Agency. And I would invite anybody to contact any one of us to find out the efforts that we are undertaking, because there are many efforts. John, sorry.
I think you may still be on mute, John.
I am. Okay. Yeah, so I served on the California Biodiversity Network, where we worked on the 30 by 30 initiative. And so in the process, CA Nature was developed, which allows an individual to go online and actually look at parcels of property throughout the California for their biodiversity as well as other attributes. So the sort of driving criteria for the extra 5%, which is roughly 5 million acres, that need to be added into some level of durable conservation, one of the drivers is public access, that these aren't off in the middle of nowhere lands, but lands that can provide public access as well as biodiversity, landscape level connectivity, climate mitigation, all of those factors combined. And you can sort of sort through all of the different kinds of lands we have in California, highly diverse, and sort of come up with a set of priorities. And I think that's kind of the next phase.
Thanks, John. Is there a resource that you would recommend people checking out? Is that something that's on the state, or is 30 by 30 being run separately?
No, it's the state and it's the CA Nature that you can Google that.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. I think we have time for maybe one or two questions. So Devika, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, we have two good questions. Let's see. Let's start with the one for Ian. This one is from Sabrina. Thinking about times when you're out in these spaces with diverse groups of youth, what about the built spaces or the adults you're with helps you feel comfortable and like you belong?
Hi Sabrina, thank you for your question. Yeah, the adults do play a big role in yes and feeling comfortable. I mean, they're always there to support you. If you have any doubts about nature or any other doubts, they're always someone you can talk to. They're always someone you can be confident with, and which is I think a lot of times people in our community lack. You know, they don't really have a resource to go to, or they can't really talk about their sentiments, their emotions, problems they're going through. And the adults in our space, they can be that person if there's not someone available.
Thank you, Ian. All right, I think we have time for one more. This one is from Michael. The work you all are doing or the gifts you all are providing are addressing wildly successful issues that are familiar in our parks, education, outdoor communities. How might these successes be leveraged into the national discussions? And there's a lot more context, which Vanessa is putting in the chat. And yeah, I think I'll stop there.
I'll just finish that sentiment around the question being so that when these famous messengers speak, they speak of those successes. So, you know, we hear a lot of things that are not going right, but you know, this is an opportunity to lift up what is working. And now, John, I wonder, this may be a slightly off topic in the answer, but you know, I know you've spoken to some park superintendents who've been in their respective places for a long time. You know, how are they feeling? What is the message? What gives you hope when, you know, you hear from these leaders?
Well, to be honest about it, at the moment, it's pretty depressing because there's many people, not just park superintendents, but park interpreters, park rangers, resource managers, scientists, are all feeling that their life's work, their mission-oriented careers are under siege, and that many have been fired or forced into retirement, or have been placed on furlough with an uncertain future. Many of the sort of core offices, like the Natural Resource program, which was based in Fort Collins, is slated for complete closure. Our Historic Preservation Center in the South, which provides technical assistance to preserve historic homes, has been completely shuttered, and all the employees fired. So that's the atmosphere that we're working in right now. I guess the optimism I have is that there's still a core group of really wonderful young professionals in the organization that are going to still be there when this is over. And they will rise up and assume the leadership responsibilities for not only the National Park Service, but all the programs that the National Park Service administers, and working with partners. I think at this moment, as Hannah points out, our philanthropic and our partnership and our advocacy organizations have to carry the torch for a while. And fortunately, we have strong support relationships that have been built over generations with these organizations that are new ones that are rising up, and many of them have been around for a long time as well. So I feel like the sort of body of institutions that are there are going to survive. Things are going to look different when it comes out on the other side. I don't think it's going to be rebuilt in the same way. I think that too much will have been dismantled to sort of just put it back the way it was. But I think we can be creative, and we've got young leaders like Ian and others out there that will help us reshape this and maybe into something that is more equitable, serves a much greater community than it has in the past. And that's optimism in my view. I think that has huge potential.
Yeah. Thanks, Jon. Thank you for the dose of realism, but also some optimism for the people who are there. And I think Michael, to your point and question, we have a lot of people who are coming forward to talk about the issues of the day. These are obviously issues that we need to continue to highlight via well-known authors. Jon, I want to thank you for putting your voice and word out there. I just saw an article from you that you had in The Guardian about, Trump moving to privatize national parks and us needing to be weary of that and mindful. And it's really important that we continue to lift up our voices so that the general public is aware and can speak out against this if it moves in that direction. So that's another resource that we'll include for folks. But we are at that time. So I want to just, again, bring us to a close and summarize some of the ways that we've heard that inspire us in the face of challenge and hopefully get us to action. I know many of you on this call are working in direct service in schools, nonprofits, government agencies. So my encouragement to myself, as it is to much as to you, is to take care of yourself. Make sure that you're getting outside to be nourished by nature, and just because we know that we can't pour, all that we have from an empty cup. Advocate at your school district, your foundation, and your community for outdoor access and equity. I know sometimes it feels like we're speaking to the choir, but it is important that we continue to raise our voices when these things come up. And programs that we cherish and that we rely on in order to be healthy are threatened. So we'll again include a link where you can contact your local representatives, senators, as well as folks in the House. And then lastly, for those of you who might identify as funders or who are philanthropically inclined, please continue to invest with unrestricted operating funds. We heard that from Hannah. Invest in the many nonprofits doing outdoor equity work. Increase your gifts if you can. Gifting time, money, volunteerism. This is an opportunity for us to come together collectively at this time. And there's so many organizations doing vital work with and for students like Ian, and those gifts really move the needle. Obviously, we're seeing this right now with our own Basecamp campaign. It's 3 years in the making, but we have folks who have dug very deep and supported us with their generosity. Thanks to a group of inner circle donors and foundations, we've raised $5 million of our $6 million goal. So we're right on the cusp of being able to turn this center into reality, and we're going to break ground later this fall. If you're interested in learning more about YES and that campaign, you can visit the link in the chat, or you can join us on the afternoon of Tuesday, June 10th. We're going to be up in Alvarado and Wildcat with our friends from East Bay Regional Park District. It'll be an immersive walk alongside naturalist Melissa Folks. And we're going to take a deeper look, into our work and Richmond's history. You get a chance to meet some of our youth and staff, and have an invitation to become involved should you feel so moved. So again, look for that link in the chat. We'll also send it up as a follow-up invitation when we send out our materials and resources. All right, so we're 2 minutes past. Again, thank you all for joining us today. Really want to thank our committed and inspiring panelists. It really reminded me that this conversation and that hope is not passive. It's something that we create through the care of self, through our leadership, advocacy, and investment. So with that, I wish you all well, and hope to see you back here again for a future roundtable. Thank you.